The Millionaire, the homeless black man, and Elon Musk meet Donald Trump. The ballroom buzzed with bright chandeliers and flashing cameras, a sea of sleek black tuxedos and shimmering gowns. Richard Thompson, billionaire and king of luxury, stood near the grand marble staircase, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. Tonight was his night. Fine wine, celebrity whispers, the kind of charity gala people would write about for months. He was used to this life, the glitter, the power, the perfect smiles, but nothing could prepare him for the moment his 10-year-old son, Ethan, dropped a bombshell in front of a room full of the elite. "He's my brother!" The words hit Richard like a punch to the gut. Time froze for a heartbeat. Around him, murmurs started to ripple through the rich and famous. Faces shifted from polite curiosity to frozen shock. Glasses paused midway to lips. Ethan stood there, innocent and confused, unaware of the storm he had just unleashed. Richard's heart pounded chaotic beats. His chest tightened, breath caught. He looked down, his hand shaky as it brushed Ethan's curls. The boy had spent his entire life in an orphanage, miles away from this world of glitter and lies. But that one sentence cracked everything Richard thought he knew. Across the room, near a shadowy corner, a woman caught the flash of the boy's words. Wrapped in tattered layers of worn clothing, Maya's eyes widened, her breath itching painfully. She pressed her back against the cold wall, her heart thudding so loud she feared everyone could hear its frantic beat. She was homeless, invisible to most, but she held the truth, the secret Richard never wanted to face. Ethan's real story. Her story. The crowd didn't see her trembling fingers clutch a faded photograph. They didn't know that this woman was ready to challenge the empire Richard built from whispered deals and secret sins. Nearby, a hush descended. Then, a shout from a drunk guest. "Is this real? This kid has a brother?" More heads turned. Questions sparked like wildfire. Richard's eyes locked on Maya for the first time. The connection snapped tight. Pain, hope, fear, tangled in one unstoppable force. Was she the key to the twisted past he buried? Could he face the ruin that truth promised? Meanwhile, whispers slithered through the gala of dark money trails, illicit deals cooling beneath polished smiles. A mysterious tip had reached Richard just hours before, a secret about his father's shadowy business. His world's foundation was cracking beneath his feet. Maya's own hands shook as she uncovered more pieces of a past she had desperately tried to forget, each revelation stronger than the last. And with every secret exposed, the fight for Ethan's future spiraled into a fierce battle, one that could tear apart the man who thought he owned everything. In this glittering cage of status and lies, Richard felt something he couldn't name. A fierce, growing love for a boy he barely knew, tangled up with guilt he couldn't shake. But could love survive the poison of old betrayals? Or would the secrets suffocate every chance of a real family? As Ethan's innocent words kept echoing, the question hung in the charged air, leaving everyone guessing. Who really is the stranger in the room? And who can be trusted? Take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content that's coming. And since you're here, drop a powerful like that really helps me with the algorithm. Oh, and let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact! As Ethan's words hung in the air, an electric tension crept through the ballroom. Richard's heart raced, thoughts tumbling over one another. Who was this woman, and what secrets connected her to his past? Suddenly, a piercing scream sliced through the murmurs. The voice belonged to a woman dressed in a stunning red gown, her eyes wide as she staggered backward. "Call an ambulance!" she cried, her hand covering her mouth in horror. A figure near the back of the room collapsed to the floor. A man in a sleek tuxedo. The crowd parted, a wave of gasps cascading through the throng of guests. Richard's focus shifted sharply. It was Marcus, his closest business partner. The man lay still, his face pale and lifeless against the glimmer of the marble tiles. Richard felt the ground shake beneath him. Panic surged, drowning out all other thoughts. He pushed through the crowd, urgency flooding his limbs. What had happened? He dropped to his knees beside Marcus, the scent of cologne mingling with the smell of alcohol and fear. "Marcus, wake up!" But the eyes were glassy, unseeing. Silence fell, a thick, oppressive hush that swallowed the sounds of the gala. Richard's chest tightened. He reached for Marcus's pulse, but found nothing. Only cold skin. Maya stood by the edges, frozen. She had no idea what occurred, yet something twisted deep inside, like the threads of fate tightening around her neck. Her hand still clutched the old photograph, remembering a past she had tried to bury. As emergency personnel rushed in, wild murmurs erupted. "Heart attack," someone suggested. "No, it must have been overdose," another whispered with a shaky voice. Fingers pointed, glances turned accusatory. A raucous voice blared through the chaos. "What did that son of a—" Richard's head snapped toward the sound. It was Donald Trump, grinning smugly, looking more amused than concerned. "Some gamble went wrong, I suppose." Richard's shock deepened. This was a tragedy. Yet here stood the former president, reveling in the chaos. "Enough!" Richard barked, rising to his feet. "Shut your mouth!" But the damage was done. Subtle threads connecting Marcus's death to Richard's empire began to unfurl in the minds of the elite. Could Marcus have known about Richard's father's shady dealings? Did he have information that could shatter everything? Just when Richard thought the night couldn't get worse, he caught a glimpse of Maya's face. It was a mask of terror, blended with something else. Knowledge. Understanding. She stepped closer, her eyes flickering with a hint of what could be a new revelation. "You don't know, do you?" The tension was electric between them. "Ha ha ha ha! Ha ha ha!" The words hung there, charging the space with unspoken truths. The stunning ballroom, with all its rich decadence, faded into the background. Ethan reached for Richard, innocent, yet wide-eyed, sensing the shift. "Dad, what's wrong?" Richard couldn't answer. His mind was racing, grappling with guilt. Guilt for the secrets he'd kept, and the life he thought he controlled. And there stood Maya, her silent plea rippling through the air. Could this woman truly hold the answers to his past? A distant siren wailed, growing louder. As the first responders rushed in, Richard felt the walls closing in. Everything he had built, wealth, status, connections, teetered on the edge of collapse. And as the paramedics worked over Marcus's body, the photograph slipped from Maya's fingers, fluttering across the floor like a fallen leaf, revealing a familiar face. Richard's breath hitched. It was a younger version of him, alongside a woman he barely remembered, but could not forget, his mother. A gasp filled the room as realization swept through the crowd. The truth was more complicated than any of them could have imagined. In that moment, as secrets rushed to the surface, Richard knew the night was far from over. All those lies were on the verge of being exposed, and the smallest fracture could lead to a complete shatter. The question now surged stronger than ever. Who truly held the pieces of the past? And how would it all come crashing down? The silence wrapped around the ballroom like a thick fog, the chatter halting. All eyes glued to the scene unfolding by the grand staircase. Richard's heart raced, each beat echoing with uncertainty. He struggled to hold on to some. The truth was there, hanging in the air like a storm cloud, and he could almost taste the salt of his unspilled tears. Ethan stood wide-eyed beside him, still blissfully unaware of the chaos his words had ignited. Richard looked back at Maya. Her eyes, dark and deep, held secrets that could drown him, could demolish everything he worked so hard to build. But just then, like a bolt from the blue, a loud crash erupted from the far side of the room. Gasps rippled through the attendees. A waiter stumbled, dropping an entire tray of crystal champagne flutes. The sound, shattering glass, echoed like gunfire. As everyone turned, confusion swirled in the air amidst the broken shards. Then, a figure burst through the crowd. A tall man with disheveled hair, a wild look in his eyes. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice rising above the murmurs. "You don't know who he is." Richard's pulse quickened. "Who was this?" The interloper pushed forward, panic and urgency in his expression. He barged into the space between Richard and Maya, breathing heavily. "Ethan, he's not just a boy," the man said breathlessly, pointing at the child with trembling fingers. "He's the key to everything, to your father's legacy." Richard's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" he demanded, ignoring the confusion on Ethan's innocent face. The tension in the room thickened, a mix of intrigue and dread, swirling like a storm. "Your father!" The man hesitated, darting his gaze around the room as if the walls might eavesdrop. "He dealt in darkness, in unspeakable things. Ethan, the orphanage, Maya, everything ties back to hidden truths, to betrayals that could ruin you." Maya shifted, her eyes flickering with a mix of fear and recognition. "What are you saying?" Her voice trembled. "The money, the deals, they all led to a secret your father wanted to bury. Ethan is more than just some orphan. He's connected to your family in ways you can't imagine." The man's words unleashed a wave of gasps, growing louder with every syllable. Richard felt the ground shift beneath him. "Connected? How?" Panic clawed at his throat. "I can't explain here," the man said, his breath rapid, desperation leaking into his words. "But your father, he made a pact, a deal with forces that lie in the shadows." Suddenly, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance, creeping closer. Richard's heart raced. Was this chaos meant to save him or lead him to his ruin? He felt the walls closing in, his tangled past surfacing, ready to consume him. Maya's hands shook at her sides, the photograph still clenched in her palm, a remnant of the life she once knew. The whole gala shifted, tension ricocheting off the walls, eyes darting from Richard to Maya, then to Ethan, each person trying to grasp the magnitude of the moment. But as the sirenes gruñeron, one question hung in the air like a noose. Who was the real enemy in this room of glittering gowns and polished smiles? And what secrets lay waiting to erupt, threatening to turn everything Richard held dear to ash? As fear coursed through him, Richard realized there might be no escaping the past after all. The silence wrapped around the ballroom like fog, smothering any hope for a simple solution. Richard's heart thundered as he stood there, gripping Ethan's small hand. Frantic whispers ricocheted off the glittering walls, an unseen current of panic palpable in the air. He could barely breathe, a suffocating mixture of fear and confusion, wrapping tightly around his chest. Maya remained rooted beside him, her eyes wide with disbelief. The man's shocking revelation hung over them like a black cloud, threatening to swallow them whole. "What do you mean Ethan is connected?" she managed to ask, her voice a shaky thread barely keeping the fabric of. "Yes, tell us," he urged the man, clinging to the thread of possibility that this could somehow make sense. "What is Ethan's connection to any of this?" But before the man could respond, the air shimmered with chaos. Paramedics rushed in, their voices blending into a blur of authority and worry. "Step aside! Clear the way!" The crowd parted, buzzing with collective anxiety, all eyes glued to the unfolding scene. Ethan squeezed Richard's hand, looking up with trusting eyes, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. "Dad, what's happening?" Richard wanted to protect him, to shield him from this cruel reality. But how could he, when the weight of his family's secrets threatened to crush them all? Suddenly, from the back of the room, a voice rang out, cutting through the murmurs. "Stop!" It was a woman, tall and assertive, her voice slicing through the tension with raw authority. All heads turned, the air charged with disbelief as she stepped forward, radiating a familiar energy that sent chills down Richard's spine. "Maya, you need to know the truth," she said, her eyes locked onto the homeless woman gripping the photograph. "I've spent years hiding, but it's time to expose what we're all running from." Maya's breath caught, recognizing the urgency. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm your sister." The words hung heavy in the air. "I'm here because of him." She gestured toward Ethan. Richard felt as though the room had spun on its axis. "What?" he breathed, disbelief rippling through him. His mind raced, trying to piece together a puzzle he never knew existed. "Yes, and Ethan is our nephew." "His mother." The woman's voice faltered, filled with emotion. "And she didn't abandon you, Maya. It was all orchestrated. She was trying to protect you both." Maya staggered backward, shock tugging at her features. The photograph slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the ground, its implications echoing in the charged room. The crowd gasped, eyes darting between the three of them. Richard, Maya, and the newly revealed sister. Richard's chest tightened. Anger welled up inside him. "This is madness! You think you can just step in here and... But it's the truth, she interrupted, unwavering. Your father, Richard, he funded everything, and it all links back to this child, to the legacy only he can break free from. As the sirens wailed, a sense of urgency dropped like a weight in the room. Everyone shifted uncomfortably, mouths agape, tension building into an unbearable crescendo. Then, like a twisted dagger of fate, the ground trembled beneath them. The lights flickered, gasps erupted, and the entire ballroom plunged into darkness. A sharp scream pierced through the air, a cold whisper of dread wrapping around them. In that darkness, chaos erupted. Screams mingled with shouts, panic spreading like wildfire. Richard could hear Ethan crying out for him, small and frightened. Richard's heart twisted in pain. But then, before he could react, a series of explosive flashes lit the room. A cacophony of bright lights and loud booms erupted, as though fireworks had gone awry. "What's happening?" Richard shouted, pulling Ethan close against his chest, the boy trembling in his arms. "Get back!" the woman yelled, pushing through the throng of people. The unexpected chaos closed in around them. Richard felt a surge of adrenaline, the instinct to protect taking over. All thoughts of legacy and riches vanished in the wake of pure survival. In the midst of the bedlam, a figure darted through the crowd, a hoodie obscuring their face, holding something, a device perhaps. Everything froze for a heartbeat, and then it cracked wide open. Would secrets be unveiled? Or would this plunge them all into deeper darkness? In that moment of uncertainty, Richard's mind raced as the question surged stronger than ever. Who was the true enemy in the room? And would they all make it out alive? As Ethan's words hung in the air like a weight, an awkward silence fell over the gala. Richard tried to gather his thoughts, but a wave of panic surged inside him. Who was Maya? Did she really hold the key to everything he feared? The crowd shifted, eyes darting between the boy and the woman draped in shadows. "Ethan, sweetheart, let's not," Richard began, kneeling to meet his son's gaze. But before he could smooth things over, an unexpected figure stepped into the spotlight. "Stop! Just stop!" shouted a sharp voice from the back of the ballroom. All heads turned. A woman stood there, her cheeks flushed, eyes wide with rage and desperation. It was Ava, Richard's estranged sister. She had vanished from his life when their family's scandals erupted. And now, here she was, the one he never expected to see again. "Ethan! Come here!" she cried, her voice breaking. "You have no idea what you're saying!" Richard's heart raced. "Ava, this isn't the time." "No!" she snapped, advancing toward Richard, the crowd parting like water. "I've spent years finding my footing again, hiding from our family's past. But this is too much." Ethan watched with wide eyes, bewildered but unyielding. "But," she said. Ava whipped around to face Maya. "You don't get to claim him. Not now, not ever." Her voice was laced with venom. "I'm not letting you ruin another life." Richard felt the floor shift beneath him. What was she saying? The angle of her body, the tension in her arms, suggested she had a monstrous truth ready to spill forth. Maya stood frozen, clutching the photograph tighter, her breath catching like it did in the cold. "I'm not ruining anything. I'm protecting—" "Protecting?" Ava spat. "You're here to destroy us. Do you have any idea the damage you've done? The lies you've fed?" Richard's mind raced. What lies? What damage? He couldn't piece together what was happening. Ava's eyes burned with something bitter, like she had carried a weight for too long, and now it was bursting free. "You're lying to him, Maya. You can't keep this secret forever." The air crackled, a storm brewing. Gasps echoed, confusion painted across the faces around them. The crowd was now a mixed bag of shock, intrigue, and fear, pulses quickening in unison. "What secret?" Richard demanded, his voice harsh against the tide of whispers that surged around them. Ava took a step forward, her fists held tightly at her sides. "Ethan is just a piece of a far bigger puzzle. You don't even know who his mother really was, do you?" Richard felt a chill wash over him. What did she mean? His thoughts raced in circles as buried memories clawed to the surface. Maya finally lowered the photograph, revealing a wild-eyed baby in the arms of a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Ava. Richard's heart dropped. That's Mom." "Yes," Ava said, her voice low but fierce. "And that woman? She didn't disappear by accident." A jolt of realization gripped Richard. The room began to spin as understanding crashed over him like icy water. "No, it can't be." Ava smiled, but it was a smile that cut deep. "It is, brother. You have no idea how tangled everything really is." Moments hung heavy. The world shuddered with unspoken truths waiting to erupt. Richard looked at Ethan, the boy now a mere pawn in a much darker game. Could this unravel everything he once thought was secure? Would love survive in all this chaos? The crowd's murmurs morphed into a drumroll of anticipation, and Richard faced the fragile truth staring back at him. In that moment, everything shifted. The stakes grew impossibly high, a whirlwind threatening to pull apart the very fabric of their lives. So, who was really the stranger in the room? The room held its breath. Every gaze was locked on Richard. Every whisper hung suspended in the air. And then, just as the tension reached a breaking point, a loud crash echoed from the far side of the ballroom. Like a jolt through the crowd, heads snapped towards the sound. A waiter, tray thrown aside, scrambled across the floor as heavy footsteps thudded in pursuit. The air thickened with uncertainty, confusion rippling through the elite audience. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Stop him! He's getting away!" Richard's heart raced. In that moment, the reality of the gala slipped, replaced by chaos. The figure darted toward the exit. A tall man with disheveled hair, dressed sharply but frantically out of place. Panic surged. Maya's eyes widened further as she recognized the man. "Isaac!" she gasped. Her brother. Unbelievable. The truth crashed over her like a wave, pulling her under. How could he be here? What had he done? Richard instinctively moved forward, driven by a swirl of emotions, fear, confusion, and a flicker of connection to the boy he just learned was his. "Ethan, stay close," he barked, his voice cracking. The buzz in the room morphed into shouts and gasps as people tried to assess the disturbance, pointing, murmuring. "Who is he? What's happening?" Eyes darted around, sowing suspicion and conjecture. Ethan clutched the edge of his father's tuxedo, bewildered, searching for comfort. "Dad, who is that man?" Just as Richard opened his mouth to reply, another crash erupted from the hallway. An explosion of glass shattered the calm, cascading shards into the grand room. Screams echoed, panic took root, and seconds felt like hours. Isaac stumbled back, wide-eyed. His body was marked with fresh bruises, clothes torn, a stark contrast to the polished crowd. Richard's heart sank, a chill creeping down his spine. The secrets came tumbling back, frayed edges of his past gnawing at his mind. Who was this man, and what did he want? "Get him!" a voice yelled, but Richard couldn't move. He felt frozen. The fear rippling around him made him acutely aware of Ethan by his side. This wasn't just a gala anymore. This was a turning point. Isaac turned, and in that instant, their eyes locked. There was desperation in his gaze, but also something deeper, pain, recognition, a hint of family resemblance. "Please, I need to talk to you." Isaac's voice cut through the chaos, filled with raw urgency. He took a step closer, his breath ragged, pleading. "You need to understand. Everything you know is a lie. I can prove it." Richard's heart pounded unbearably. The room lost its luster, vibrant colors swirling into a dark haze. Maya shot Richard a warning look. The truth of their intertwined lives echoed. "Stay away from my family!" Richard shouted, his voice trembling, but deep inside, the words held less weight each moment. Was this man more than an intruder? Was he the key to the secrets Richard had buried deep within his soul? With every fleeting glance and each frantic breath, the weight of revelation pressed down. This night held more than a social gathering. It dangled precariously, ready to unveil the truths Richard fought hard to forget. And just as he prepared to step toward Isaac, the lights flickered, plunging the ballroom into darkness. The tension hung thick in the air, a weight that felt like thunderclouds. Richard could barely breathe as he tried to process Ethan's explosive declaration. Maya's heart raced, the photograph in her hands nearly slipping away as she fought to keep it together. The murmurs of disbelief surrounded them, but it was the look in Richard's eyes, both terrified and desperate, that knocked the breath from her lungs. Then, just as the crowd began to lean in for more, the massive double doors burst open, slamming against the wall, sending jolts of shock through everyone present. A wiry man stumbled in, disheveled and wild-eyed, his clothes reeking of desperation and chaos. He was gasping for breath, clutching a crumpled envelope like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice ragged. "You need to hear this." The room silenced, all eyes turning to the interloper as he staggered forward. Ignoring the bewildered glares, "Richard, Ethan, it's about your mother," he panted. Richard's heart sunk. His mother had been a queen in the world of high society, a woman everybody revered. But she died years ago, leaving behind a legacy painted in gold and silk. "What are you talking about?" Richard replied, voice low and fierce. The man caught his breath, eyes darting to Maya, before locking back onto Richard. "She was a part of this. All of this. I have proof." His voice cracked like a whip, slicing through the tension hanging thick in the air. The room buzzed anew, stunned faces everywhere. From the corner, Maya's mind raced as memories twisted and turned, her own scars throbbing at the mention of Richard's mother. It was a mess of silken threads interwoven with hidden truths. She didn't want to believe it, but shadows of a troubled past were creeping back, demanding to be acknowledged. "Proof?" Richard echoed, voice suddenly steady, yet fear clutched at his heart. He took a step closer, drawn in by the desperation of the moment. With shaking hands, the man ripped the envelope open, pulling out its contents. "This letter, it's a confession from her own hand." He held it high, and the paper trembled in his grip, like a whisper revealing doom. Richard felt the air crackle, an electric current ready to consume. "Show it to me," he breathed, stepping forward. Maya watched, her breath trapped in her throat. The crowd leaned in, the realization dawning that they were on the brink of a revelation that could sink his empire or rebuild it anew. But before the stranger could unfold the truth, chaos erupted. A loud bang erupted from somewhere near the back of the ballroom. Gasps erupted as a shadowy figure lurched through the crowd, knocking over tables, scattering crystal goblets and floral arrangements, all elegant chaos turned grim. Another shout pierced the tension. "Get down!" someone screamed as the figure raised a weapon, arm outstretched toward Richard. Gasps of horror echoed, eyes going wide in panic. Time froze again as one clear thought pulsed through Richard's mind. Protect Ethan. He moved instinctively. The world flipped upside down. Then darkness swallowed the room, and just as quickly, it all unfolded into a blinding flash of fear and confusion, blurring reality into a nightmare. As silence descended, it turned into an anguished scream, the voice unmistakably Maya's. In that instant, everything shifted. Relationships, truths, lives tethered to an unforeseen fate loomed like shadows, ready to engulf them all. What would the truth of the letter reveal? What danger now lurked in the heart of what seemed to be a night of celebration? In a world where trust was fragile, layers of hidden realities began to peel away, promising consequences that would reverberate far beyond that ballroom. Who could they trust? The question hung in the air, a suffocating shroud pressing down as the mystery deepened. The darkness swallowed the ballroom, heavy and suffocating. Whispers of confusion became frantic cries, panic radiating outward like ripples on a pond. Richard could hardly breathe, clutching Ethan with trembling hands as fear clutched at his heart. The silence was deafening, only broken by Maya's choked scream. Then, in that instant of chaos, a bright flash cut through the pitch blackness. "Everyone down!" a security guard yelled, diving for cover. Richard's instincts kicked in, shielded Ethan with his body, heart hammering in his chest. The figure moved again, a shadow in the chaos, a thin man with wild hair, eyes darting like a cornered animal. "You have to listen to me! You need to know the truth!" He sounded frantic, lost. With a crash, the lights flicked back on. Gasps erupted. The scene that emerged was a tableau of chaos. Guests huddled on the floor, some crying, others scrambling to regain their composure. Richard's attention snapped back to the man standing there, desperate and wild, clutching a tattered folder in his hands. "Richard!" the man shouted, voice raw with urgency. "They're coming for you. They know about Ethan." Richard's heart plummeted. "What do you mean? Who are you?" The man advanced a step, breathing hard. Desperation painting his face. "I'm not your enemy, Richard. I'm here to help. Your father, he made a deal with people who want to erase everything." "What?" Richard's voice shook, powerful emotions firing up behind his eyes. The chaos spun, and he felt Maya's confused gaze on him, then Ava, who looked equally lost. "It's about the legacy," the man pressed, looking back over his shoulder as if expecting someone to jump out from the shadows. "Ethan isn't just your son. He's the key. They'll kill him to cover it up." With those words, time stood still. The weight of the world crashed down around Richard's shoulders. "Stop. You're talking nonsense." "No, it's the truth." The man raised the folder high, revealing its contents. "Your mother!" His voice trembled. "She was involved in something dark, Richard, and someone else is pulling the strings now." Richard felt the room shift, the ground beneath him giving way. Every face in the room turned toward him, their expressions a chaotic blend of shock and suspicion. But before he could respond, an explosion of noise erupted from the back. People screamed as another figure burst in, clad in sleek black, a mask covering their face. "What the hell?" someone shouted. The masked figure brandished a weapon, aim unfocused. Fear surged through Richard, raw and primal. "Stay away from him!" Maya screamed, stepping forward. "Get down!" shouted Ava, pushing Ethan behind her. The tension crackled in the air, thickening like molasses. The masked man turned his gun, pointing it directly at Richard. The world twisted, breaths hitching in throats. "It's time to clean house," he growled. And then everything unfolded in an instant. A blinding flash lit the room as shots rang out. Two loud cracks pierced through the chaos, and Richard felt a crushing weight slam into his side. As he fell, gasping, a sharp pain radiating from his abdomen. "Richard!" Ethan's voice echoed, breaking through the nightmare. Time slowed. Richard's vision blurred, panic rising as he tried to reach for his son. In that pivotal moment, realization slammed into him. The truth he had hidden was not what he thought. As darkness closed in, he caught one last glance at Maya, her face twisted in anguish, and at Ava, a look of horror etched deeply in her eyes. Everything shifted. The love, the lies, the connections, they were all tangled, and he saw that the real betrayal lay far closer to home. And just before the world slipped away, the masked figure lowered their gun, and the truth they'd kept buried clawed its way back to the surface. What had he lost, and who was he really? The air thickened, and the last thing he heard before the abyss engulfed him was Ethan's terrified cry, reverberating through every crack and crevice. A haunting reminder that everything was about to change. As darkness enveloped the room, Richard felt a cold wave wash over him. The echo of Ethan's terrified cry pierced through the haze, making his heart race even faster. He tried to reach out, to pull his son close, but his body felt heavy, like it was sinking into a black pit. Then there was the telltale sound of sirens in the distance, wailing like banshees, drawing nearer. But deeper inside, beyond the chaos, something shifted, a flicker of movement where shadows danced. The masked figure had lowered their weapon, but was now staring intently at the stranger who had barged in with the crumpled envelope. Richard's eyes darted to the envelope just as the man jerked it open, revealing a single piece of paper. The look on his face twisted from panic to grim determination. "You want the truth?" he shouted over the rising murmurs. "Then hear this." Before he could continue, the crowd held its breath. A stillness tore through the room. Then, suddenly, a deafening bang knocked through the air, reverberating against the walls. The masked figure stumbled back, their weapon falling from their hand, clattering against the marble floor. "Richard!" Ethan's voice broke through the tension. Wide eyes locked on the unfolding drama, confused but trusting his father would protect him. Yet in the split second as the masked figure's eyes widened, the gathered crowd drew in sharp gasps. Richard felt his heart lurch. It was as if time stood still, with all focus locked onto the two dueling figures. And then, with inexplicable speed, the masked figure lunged forward, not towards Richard, but toward the unknown man with the envelope. With a powerful swing, they caught him off guard, knocking the folder from his grasp. "Stop!" Richard shouted, instinctively moving forward. But before he could reach them, the masked figure spun around, their mask slipping just enough for Richard to glimpse familiar features. Features he thought he'd never see again. "Sam!" Richard's breath hitched. Confusion twisted in his gut. "Is that you?" The figure's wild eyes bore into Richard, unlocking a vault of emotion. "You shouldn't have come back," Sam spat, shaking his head furiously. "You have no idea what you're throwing away." Richard's world tilted again. "What are you talking about?" Just then, the chaos erupted anew when Sam reached for the envelope lying on the floor. But a second shot rang out. This time, the masked assailant was quicker. The sound of the gun echoed, and Sam crumpled to the ground. "No!" Richard screamed, surging forward, fear and disbelief merging in a fiery pit in his stomach. He skidded to his knees, cradling Sam's body as the crowd collectively gasped. Blood pooled beneath them, staining the polished marble floor crimson. Panic ignited among the onlookers as they scrambled backward, whispers of confusion morphing into screams of terror. "Call an ambulance!" someone cried, but the tense air felt thick and suffocating, like a noose tightening. Ethan pressed against Richard, his small voice barely a whisper. "Dad, is he okay?" Richard struggled to speak, his heart racing, confusion clouding his mind. Sam's eyes flickered faintly, pain etched across his face. "Richard, you have to listen. The truth about your mother," he gasped, words stumbling like stones over cracked earth. "Sam, don't! Just stay with me!" Richard begged, holding Sam's head gently, desperately seeking the reality of the moment. But just as Sam's eyes dimmed, a flash of recognition sparked in Richard's mind. Everything they had built, every secret he had buried, every smile hiding lies, all rushed back in a tidal wave of revelation. As the opacity of the situation cracked, a chilling thought pierced through the fog of his mind. Was Sam entwined in this dark web of family secrets? Was he the puppet master behind the strings pulling tighter around them? And just as light faded from Sam's eyes, the room exploded with sound and chaos. But Richard's heart stopped. Everything he thought he knew about loyalty, trust, and love shattered in that heartbeat. Now a desperate question loomed over him. Could he still trust the people he thought he knew? The haze of confusion settled over him like a blanket, and the question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Who truly betrayed him? And was anyone safe from the truth? In the moments after Sam fell, the ballroom was a frenzied ocean of screams and gasping breaths. Richard cradled Sam's head, fingers trembling over the warm pool of blood, panic clawing at his insides. Ethan's small hand gripped his, eyes wide and filled with fear. "Stay close," Richard managed to choke out, keeping his body shielding Ethan. The cacophony swirled around them, guests pushing against one another, trying to figure out what was happening. But all Richard could focus on was the body in his arms and the shaky breaths of his son beside him. Chaos erupted again as paramedics rushed in, blue uniforms flashing like siren. They moved efficiently, pushing through the crowd with urgency, all while Richard's world narrowed down to Sam's pale face. "Maya!" he shouted, searching the crowd. Her eyes were wide with concern, and she was running towards them, pushing through the throng. "What's happening?" she gasped, dropping to her knees beside Richard. He could see the fear reflected in her expression, the shared horror pulling them closer. "Sam, Richard faltered, unable to find the words as the medical team began to assess the situation. "We need to get him help!" Maya looked at Sam. "He can't be!" Her voice broke, and Richard felt his heart sink deeper. They had just begun to untangle their lives, only to have the threads of fate pull tighter, threatening to choke them all. Suddenly, a loud whistle caught everyone's attention. The masked figure stood, weapon dropped, a frenzy of emotions swirling in their eyes. "I didn't mean to," they began, but Richard cut them off, rage bubbling over. "Get out! Get out of here now!" Richard screamed, his voice hoarse. A figure hesitated before bolting toward the exit, disappearing into the throng of chaos. With every second, Richard felt the urgency pulse through him. Sam's breath was fading, his body growing colder. The paramedics worked rapidly, their voices a blur of commands as they moved Sam onto a stretcher. "Maya! Ethan!" Richard clenched his jaw, taking a deep breath. The world around them was a storm, but right now, he needed to be their anchor. "Stay here. I'm going with him." "No," Maya protested, fear lacing her tone. "You can't just leave. I have to. This is my family now." He didn't wait for her to respond. He felt the weight of every connection wrap around him tighter, even as he knelt beside Sam, whose eyes fluttered open briefly. "Richard," Sam whispered, I didn't mean to bring this." "I know," Richard said, clutching his hand tighter. "Just hold on. We're getting you help. You're gonna be okay." "We need to move," a paramedic yelled, and Richard reluctantly let them take Sam, clutching in agony as they wheeled him away into the bright, blaring lights of the hallway. "Ethan!" Richard called out, feeling a rush of fear and protectiveness all over again. He turned to see his son standing there, a shadow of worry on his small face. Richard rushed back and knelt, pulling him into a hug. "It's going to be all right, buddy. Will Sam be okay? He asked, voice small and full of innocence. Richard took a shaky breath. I don't know, his heart ached. But we have to believe he will be. We have to believe we all will, Ethan. Just then, Maya's voice broke through, softer but fierce. I'll find out what happened. We'll uncover the truth together. Richard nodded, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they had each other now. The connections, the truth, even the heartbreak could lead to healing. And just as the tension started to ebb, the lights flickered. A new figure emerged, silhouetted against the chaos. An unknown stranger, holding something tight in their fist. In that moment of uncertainty, Richard's gut twisted. What more secrets could unravel from this night of confusion? The questions hung heavy, the silence broken only by faint sirens, and the chatter of the crowd still reeling. While the future remained clouded with doubt, they had each other, and that was something incredibly worth fighting for. Now more than ever, Richard knew he had to protect what mattered most. And amidst the tapestry of uncertainty, one question persisted. When would the past truly stop haunting them? And what shadows still lingered in the corners of their lives? This is the moment to show your support. You have to subscribe now so you don't miss the upcoming exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us grow. Flood the comment section with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. And don't wait even a second longer to share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this ending. They can't miss out. Your engagement makes all the difference. Thank you for being a part of this amazing community.